Hello, so this is just a short podcast using Jupyter notebooks to run Python code and a brief introduction to Microsoft Azure, which is a way of kind of hosting Jupyter notebooks in the cloud. Jupyter notebooks are a way to mix Python code and text. And for many projects like machine learning projects or whenever many people give examples, they now almost not universally provide Jupyter notebooks because you can mix kind of instructions and text and then have bits of code in line. It makes it just easier to learn and you can just download and play with it. And so it's just sometimes it's a more sophisticated way of doing comments. It allows documentation code to be mixed. One advantage for kind of maths applications is easy to include mathematics in the document. For example, you can include latex. So this equation here has been rendered using LaTeX and then inserted. And there's a very simple syntax between that. People like using data science uses Jupyter notebooks a lot because it's a lot easier to collaborate. If you have a bigger analysis you want to give to somebody else, it kind of helps to, often you have to produce a document and then the document's sort of separate to the text. But with the Jupyter notebook, the document and text are mixed together and it makes it easier to collaborate. And as I said before, many online examples say machine learning, a lot of times if they want to explain something, they give you a Jupyter notebook to explain the method. And this is actually sort of what it looks like. I'm running the thing in slide mode, which is a bit of a strange way. We'll look at a more standard application, but you can have text, and then down here you have some Python, import math, computing the cos of an angle to radians, prints it out. And that's the way, that's essentially what a Jupyter notebook is. So Microsoft Azure, this is a cloud system, which just means Microsoft provides hardware, like essentially it's a data center, and some of which is free to use. And increasingly now, many companies use the cloud system for their computing needs. And this just means that they don't have to have the same kind of IT infrastructure. They can run their web servers. Microsoft runs them, and they can just deal with the software. So Microsoft Azure is a big package. It's the cloud system offered by Microsoft, and it has many features such as databases, machine learning, and ways to integrate that with mobile apps. Essentially, if you want to do a biggish calculation which can't be handled on a mobile phone, your mobile phone app then connects to the cloud, which does the calculation and sends the result back to the phone. And this is sort of the way that people do translation and apps. So we're not going to use a lot. This is kind of quite a big system. We're not going to use any of the much of the Azure stuff, but they allow the host of Jupyter notebooks, so you can actually run Python in the cloud. And the major reason we're really doing it is just because it is actually a bit easy to install modules. So one of the modules I want to do the integer programming is called Pulp, and it's just a bit easier to install on in the Azure cloud rather than on the university workstations at the moment. Okay, it is a free system for running Jupyter notebooks to run Python. There are some restrictions. You can't go completely mad. You can't run off big Bitcoin calculation or anything like that. So for any kind of usual standard kind of studenty type calculation, it's completely fine. Many of the other cloud providers have their own systems. For example, Google has Google Colab, and that's another way of running Python in the cloud. It runs on the Google infrastructure, and the actual notebooks are stored in the Google Drive. Okay, let's move out of. So this is what more traditionally what a Google Notebook looks like. So it's organized by projects. So one advantage of the I'll show a bit later of the Google kind of infrastructure, the Microsoft infrastructure, is actually you can use your university account to actually access it, which I'll explain in a minute. Let's go down to projects. Again, various things. So for the MROC, you want to have information like this. So here are some basic Jupyter notebooks. Here's a base example. Okay, so these things run on the Microsoft Azure cloud, so you have to wait a little bit before the. So this thing runs on the website, but actually the actual calculations are done on a data center somewhere, and sometimes you have to wait a little bit to. You have to wait a little bit to get access to a computer, so it's not super fast. Okay, to run the library, so there are cells. Some of these things have documentations in it, and there's this little markup example to do. Let's run. So what this command here does, it installs conda. It installs the pulp library. This -y, which is part of the thing. So this is a little command which does installation. And then after that, you can run the example. And this is the example I think I showed in the lectures. Okay, so we can run it. Okay, so we need to run the install. So with these things, you can add cells, write in Python commands in the text, and then up at the top there are some of the cells are written as code and markdown. Markdown is just sort of like documentation and codes. And then there's some information if you want to add a cell, view cells and do various things. And see here you're running Python 3.6. The different versions of Python you can run. You can even run R. I've not tried running R on this system, but it is possible. Other things to note is you can create a new notebook. So here 1.3.6. You can download it. So if you want to save stuff outside Python, outside the Microsoft Azure things, you can do. So the .ipynb framework is the Jupyter Notebook framework. You can also extract it in LaTeX and stuff like that. And you can also import, and you can also upload a Jupyter Notebook and run. So the university systems will run Jupyter Notebooks, but the issue is it doesn't have this pulp library, so it wasn't possible to do that, but I decided this was perhaps a more generic system. So the actual, so if you follow the link in the coursework, this is the private network, this gives you the same thing. This is the kind of generic type interface. So this is the link that's given in the coursework, notebooks with no project MC, and so I've shared this. So the key thing here is you sign in. And this brings you to your university sign, so you can use your university IDs. And then it's usually the standard single user sign-in. And this moves you into the access we have with projects. Because this is my my directory, I can see the code. To run it, you have to click on this little clone thing here, and then this will copy all the stuff into your own work area, and then you can actually modify it. So because it's running on my system, it's in my account, I can view all these notebooks. But when you get it, if you want to copy the code over, you have to click on clone. Okay, we're still waiting for the other environment to work. So this is the disadvantage you can kind of see here as well. This thing's running on the free compute cloud. Okay, so there's little notebooks, there's a little directory structure, and there's more things you can do, but it's nothing. A lot of it's all point and click. You can kind of download the project if you want to store it in another system, or upload it to something like GitHub. Okay, this install environment takes a while. You can just kind of see here that there's generic code. Okay, so now it's finally installing. And so say these things here are cells. And this is actually the example I showed in the lectures with pulp variables. You have to define those, define the objective function, and to put in some constraints. So these things are a Jupyter Notebook cell, and then you can add in, you can print the problem, there's documentation. So this thing is a markup cell, so it's actually a piece of text. You can tell at the top it's markup. And okay, so everything's finally installed. So now if we run it, the thing runs, gives you the numbers. So this is actually a cell environment, very much like Maple or some, well, very much like the Maple environment. So we do this thing, keep running it. I'll tell her, run again, put in the constraints. Again, prints the problem out, summary of the problem. This using the pulp library, which I explained in the lectures, and also this reference at the top. Run. So this thing is actually so the actual Python is running actually on the Microsoft Azure cloud systems, and you're kind of interfacing it via a website. So now we do run out the solution. So in your kind of examples, you kind of modify this example, modify the constraints and the objective function, and some of the constraints, and that will give you the solution. So I mean, this Jupyter Notebook is a very kind of generic way of presenting Python, and it's particularly important, say, for teaching or collaboration. You want to be able to mix Python code with documentation, and it's a very kind of nice way to do that in a very generic way.